Brother, I know him as my first mentor. We've been friends for 49 years. In 1976, I got assigned to Chanute Air Force Base for technical training. Yeah, here in Illinois. I'm back. Yesterday wasn't a good travel day for me because I got delayed, no pilots for planes, and the flight attendants decided that they'd rather have Chick-fil-A than stay on time. But you know, I'd go through that 100 times to be here today. Because Steve meant so much to me, as he did so many, many more in the United States Air Force. Back in the day, in August of 1976, I was in technical training to become a liquid fuels maintenance specialist, small career field in the Air Force. And Steve was permanent party there at Chanute Air Force Base. He was assigned to the Civil Engineering Squadron, and he was responsible for taking care of the fuel system there on base. And we had a pretty good sized fuel system. They had aircraft, you know, that were assigned there, and of course aircraft refueling systems, and all types of systems. But one of the things that he needed help with one weekend, and he talked glamorously about this, that there was a fire training school there, and Steve had to work on the weekend because the fire training people trained during the week. The firemen trained during the week, and they had this mock-up of these aircraft, and then they'd shot JP4 fuel onto the aircraft to burn, and they were there to extinguish it and learn how to do that to save lives and all those kinds of things. Well, the fuel valves were malfunctioning, and so Steve said he was going to be changing those valves out on the weekend, and he asked if anybody wanted to help him. He made it sound like a very important and distinguished job. I raised my hand. You know, they told you when you come in the Air Force not to volunteer for anything, but I just wasn't one of those folks. So I raised my hand, and I went out on the weekend and helped Steve. It wasn't a glamorous job. It was a dirty job, a smelly job, a stinking job, because those valves have been leaking for quite a while. But I met my first mentor in the Air Force. He took me by his side and he showed me the job, and he talked to me about being an Air Force troop and what it meant to him, and he set the example for me to follow. He meant so much to me back in that day. And later on during the class or during the training, I got an assignment to McCord Air Force Base, my first duty assignment. And of course, Steve had just come from McCord Air Force Base. So now he's mentoring me about McCord, the people that were there, some of the people that I were going to meet and work with. And you don't realize until you've been in the service at 18 years old, right out of high school, sometimes how scary it is to be in the Air Force. And not to know where you're going to go and not to know what you're going to do, but here's this man taking the time in my career, my early career, to help me out and to mentor me. Now, we were never assigned together. We were never stationed together, but our career paths crossed many, many times. Many times. We would go to advanced training courses together. One of the classes we had to go to was tank cleaning school, so we could be a tank cleaning supervisor. And so we were there at Chanute, back at Chanute Air Force Base again, and going through classes and schools and stuff like that. One of the things, we told a lot of stories last night around the campfire, and the family knows what type of man this guy is, and his friends know what type of man he is, but he touched a lot of us, and his influence and his friendship and his mentorship meant a lot to a lot of folks, not just me. I know I'm not the only life that he touched. But later on in my career, I was assigned, it was temporary duty, and we were down at Randolph Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas. And we were the subject matter experts for our career field. We were down there to write the promotion test because we had already made it to the grade where we didn't have to take a promotion test for our career field anymore. But we were master sergeants at the time, and we were down there writing the test for other people to take. And the current test that was being taken, we had to evaluate it. And if anybody had questions about it, we had to answer those questions. And so it was like a month-long TDY, which was what we call a temporary duty. And we were down there writing the test for our career field. Now, Thing was talked about during that trip because she didn't understand what Steve was doing down there. He just left Scott Air Force Base, drove down there, and he was on this 5-person team, and she had no idea what he was doing, and he tried to explain it to her, but she had no idea. So finally he just said, we're going to class. We're going to school. And he told us that, okay, that's what he was doing. But we had a test psychologist that, I don't know, he was kind of absent-minded, and he'd come back and ask questions, and he'd sit beside you and say, Herb, what'd you mean by this, or what'd you mean by that? Well, when he sat down beside Steve Duffy every time, he says, Leonard, so what'd you mean by this? We just laughed. But for some reason, he called him Leonard. Well, the 5 of us started calling Steve Leonard. And to this day, if you look at my Facebook page, where Steve and I chat often, and we just chatted on Friday, I have him listed as Leonard. And so as a joke, when we left there, the 4 of us went out and bought him a wooden plaque. And we put on there that he was the honor graduate of this class, this school that he was going to. And it was honor graduate Leonard Duffy. You remember that plaque, Bing? I know she does because not long after I got back to my base, Steve called me and said, my wife was upset. I was like, what? She goes, oh, she saw that plaque and she was so proud of it. But then she was mad because why did they get your name wrong? But she had it hanging on the wall and she was so proud of it. Our paths crossed many, many times at conferences, and Steve got some special jobs because of some things that were going on over in the PACAF arena. He'd go and inspect new construction sites, and so he'd come to my base and be the inspector for PACAF. And, at the time, I was on Guam, Anderson Air Force Base in Guam. And I got a call from Steve. He was at Clark Air Force Base. This was somewhere around 16 June of 1991. And I was a civil engineer still there at Anderson Air Force Base in Guam. And I get a call. Steve's like, you know Mount Pinatubo blew? And I said, yeah, I know. We're getting ready for all the evacuees coming from Clark Air Base and Subic Bay, the Philippines, and we're going to bringing them through Anderson Air Force Base, some 25 to 30,000 people that we had to evacuate from there, and family members and dogs and cats and lizards and pet parrots, and I mean everybody just picked up whatever they loved and took off. He goes, well, I can't leave Clark yet. I have to stay and close Clark, but my wife's coming through. Can you take care of her? Absolutely, Steve. Make sure she gets proper housing while she's here, gets on the right plane, and gets through the whole process. Absolutely, Steve. Our paths just crossed time and time again, and we stayed friends and cohorts. He's friends with my wife. He's friends with my son. My son married a Filipino girl, and I've got Filipino grandkids that I love to death. They're just beautiful people. And Steve has been a big help through all of that. And, you know, I look back on my last 49 years and what it meant to me to be a friend, to be somebody that looked up to this man. Saturday, when my wife and I was coming home from Houston back to San Antonio, she said, "Have you been on Facebook today?" And I said, "No." She said, "I think something happened to your friend Steve." I pulled off the highway, off of Highway 10, and looked at the Facebook post. I said, "Honey, I gotta go. This man meant a lot to me." So here I am, honoring my first mentor, honoring the man I looked up to for 49 years. And I know that he's going to leave a hole in his family, but he's going to leave a hole in a lot of people. But I have some fond memories of this man, some less memories of this man. And Father, you were right. This man lived a full life. And he touched a lot of people. And as you look around the Air Force today, and as you look around society today, you will see Steve in many, many people. I love you, Steve.